Oh, yeah, I guess we don't
Hello.
have Smith, huh?
Yeah, we don't have Kyle Smith to do our intro this week, so we will just sit here and stare at one another, Adam.
There we go. I like it. But yeah, Mr. Smith is, I believe he is on a little bit of a vacation, stepping away, so it'll just be Mr. West and I today. Hope you guys are all right with that. And here's Mr. West.
Yes, I am here. I am just finished up eating and got my old handy dandy water bottle, so that means we are ready to podcast. And
Hopefully
talk
you
some
didn't have the oven going a little too long because it is 98 degrees here today.
very hot. I did meatloaf, but I did it outside on the barbecue grill in the
There you go.
little foil pan. So just put that baby outside, keep all that heat outdoors where it belongs.
I like that plan. I like that plan a lot.
Charlotte says it's the original crew. It is the OG crew.
I have a really small, weak air conditioner that doesn't work too well, but it keeps it from getting too bad in this. I live in a trailer house, so you know how hot those can get.
Oh, yeah.
It is not very fun when that happens. But we got some football and Minnesota Vikings news to talk about, and that's always exciting. I enjoy coming in here every week. I'm not sure when we'll be able to get Mr. Smith back. I know he's going to be out away for a little while, so we'll hold on for it until he can come back.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's the plan.
Yeah, like we were talking just before we started recording, Adam, tomorrow is the return of football. NFL football is back, and I will be excited to watch preseason football for about 15 minutes before I realize, oh, yeah, this is preseason football.
This is preseason Bears we're watching. Woo!
Preseason Bears that I don't even know if they're going to be playing Caleb Williams.
Although Houston's always fun to watch. I got some interesting young people.
Yeah, they sure do. Like I said, I'm actually interested to see what Chicago does. I'm interested to see how their team shapes up this year. NFC North is going to be a real tough division to play in because there could be three pretty solid teams ahead of the Vikings right now in the North.
Yeah, I just watched one of the people on TikTok. It's a big sports person. And they have like a big channel, and they have a lot of followers, and they are predicting Minnesota with 5 wins this season.
I can see it. It could be a rough year. It could be a rebuilding year for the Vikings. It all depends a lot on the quarterback. We've talked about this. It's been kind of the A topic ever since Kirk left. What kind of play we're going to get out of Sam Darnold and stuff. That's really going to depend, I think, on what kind of record this team has.
It could be a really disappointing year. It could be a really surprising year. We'll wait and see. I do think this roster has enough talent that they are going to win some games that people weren't expecting.
I agree with you, Adam. You're going to sneak up on having Justin Jefferson alone is going to win you a handful of games just based on his performance on the field. And you have to believe that they've upgraded at the running back position and are going to be able to get something going on the ground. It really depends on how much you believe in Sam Darnold. And I think that he'll have games where he looks pretty good for this team. And I think that he probably will have ones where he throws a couple interceptions and you'll go, it wasn't so hot, because that's kind of what we've seen from him. Right. But, how much will he have grown from his time that he was able to spend kind of as a backup, with the 49ers? How much did he learn? How much is that going to be able to help him kind of reset? We'll see.
But it's been kind of a scary time for the Vikings because not only did they have the tragic loss, earlier this year, but they also had to put Mekhi Blackman on injured reserve. And now there are reports that tight end Robert Tonyan went down in training camp, and they're not sure what's going on with that. So
I didn't hear that one yet.
Yeah, we got some really kind of scary stuff going on there.
Yeah, because they're going to have to rely on their backups with TJ Hawkinson.
I'm not worried with the tight end depth. They got lots of good players there. Josh Oliver, Munt.
Yeah, they do. Anytime you get some injuries starting to pile up, though, that hurts. So it hurts a little bit.
In the secondary, Minnesota signed defensive back Bobby McCain and cornerback Fabian Monroe, as well as Jacoby Francis. So they're loading up on bodies to have a nice competition for depth at corner.
Yep.
They didn't go out and spend to get a top free agent corner, which I kind of like. I don't think they need to go and grab the most expensive guy in free agency to be able to cover all that. But I mean, I get what they're doing. But Minnesota did waive linebacker Abraham Beauplant, and I do want to say these names, but my cat decided to stand up right in front of my computer screen.
I can see the old Bernie Cat's tail sticking up there.
John Parker Romo, and they waived linebacker KJ Cloyd. This goes Cloyd.
Are you surprised that they are not doing any kind of a competition at the kicker position?
I am not really shocked because I don't want to butcher his name. Will Reichert?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. He is having an outstanding training camp. He, I believe, has been nearly flawless on his kicks, and he's been kicking pretty longer ones. So, I mean, they like that a lot. And John Parker Romo's kind of bounced around the league a little bit. So I'm not too shocked that he's not being kept in as part of the competition. And when you use a draft pick that high, we knew Reichert was the favorite heading in. But we didn't know if John Parker Romo was going to get a long stay or be a training camp body or what the plan is. Plus, I've been reading some really awkward things. Like Minnesota's trying some of their defensive players to kick the ball off for the new kickoff rules.
These new kickoff rules have the league teams are experimenting and doing some interesting things out there to try to get advantage wherever they can on the field. It's interesting, and it's interesting too because the old school mentality here is that even if you draft a kicker, Adam, we're still going to go through training camp with two kickers on the roster, and we're going to call it a competition. And
if nothing, you have a longer look at a kicker, and you have like someone that you know a little bit more about. If something happens, you need to call him up.
Yeah. I did like Kevin O'Connell's answer where he's like, we believe in the kid that we have now, and we just want to get him as many reps as possible to get him ready for the regular season. I like that.
Oh, yeah. It is some pretty good stuff. But, yeah, the kicking thing, I believe we talked about the Jarisaw extension last time, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we did that in the Duke Shelley signing, all that, I believe. So otherwise, there isn't much as far as transactions to talk about, which is fine. But the NFL Top 100 has come out, and earlier, I don't know what number he was. Do you remember which number Harrison Smith was?
I haven't been following the Top 100. I quit following the Top 100 almost immediately when Aaron Rodgers, who played, 5 minutes, was somehow on the list of the top 100 players last year.
You're being pretty generous with 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't quite know how that worked out. So I'm like, I don't need to pay attention to this list.
And Justin Jefferson was named number 18. And that came out today.
Nice.
A little bit of a dip from last year, but he was injured for a bit of last year. And I believe that if he was healthy and had bigger stats, he would be definitely higher on the list. So hopefully he can have a healthy season and climb back up that list a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I still think with him being injured last year, the fact that he was able to still step in and come back and go over 1,000 yards on the year is a pretty big accomplishment there for old Justin Jefferson.
It's fun to be excited about Justin Jefferson, but you also got to remember he's just one player on a team,
Yeah.
And we got Jordan Addison, who we're kind of like have a little bit up in the air about as far as what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anything about any league discipline, but I'll definitely be keeping my eyes open for that one. Another cool thing to be watching for on offense is I have no idea what the plan at guard is.
There's been rumblings of Dalton Reisner moving around, on the line, maybe playing right guard.
Right, because last year he took over left guard, and after Minnesota traded Ezra Cleveland, and that seemed to work out okay. But as I kept saying in here, Blake Brandel is going to be the starting left guard, and everybody's like, I won't say everybody, but most people I talked to were very disagreeing with me. And I now I'm reading that he's gonna have that left guard job, and it's going to be Ingram competing for the right guard spot. And I'm not sure how to feel about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting competition. I don't even know if you call it a competition, and I'm not knocking Dalton Reisner, but you're doing that thing that Kyle Smith loves so much, where you take a guy who's played left guard and we're going to have him play right guard, and we're going to call that a competition. And I don't really know how I feel about that. And I still think ultimately you probably start Ed Ingram because you've invested in him, and he played decent in stretches last year, and you're
Yeah.
hoping to see progression from him. And so I don't necessarily know if I want to yank him for a player that has, in all honesty, no long-term future with the Vikings. Not really. So like I don't know if you do that at Ingram.
And this is one of those years that's really essential to get that offensive line solid because you've got new quarterback, you got a new
Yeah.
running back, you got an offense that's going to try to be moving the ball on the ground. You got to protect your quarterbacks, whether it's your rookie quarterback of the future or if it's your bridge quarterback that you're trying to keep in there so your quarterback doesn't have to be thrown in. I mean, this offensive line has a big weight on their shoulders this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been reading about Christian Darrisaw working with Dallas Turner to try to make sure that they're both up to speed and good to go. And I guess there's a good relationship going there between those two. And if Turner can keep working with Darrisaw, I think only good things can happen out of that.
Yeah, I was reading about that too, and that's really interesting. I'm glad that you brought that up, Adam. They were saying that Christian Darrisaw has even pulled him aside after practice and gave him some pointers on like, hey, you're coming at me. You're doing maybe your power move a little too soon, or I see you coming here. Or try this, try this with your
Right.
stance and help adjust and help get him going and up to speed. And I love that, and that's the whole point of a team is like, let me make you better as a player and let me help you succeed.
And Turner is in that similar position that JJ McCarthy is in right now. There's
Uh-huh.
absolutely no reason to rush Turner onto the football field when you've got, Van Ginkel and you've got Grenard both ready to go. If Grenard is healthy or if Van Ginkel's good to go. I saw an update that he practiced for the first time in a while. So I'm excited about having a pass rush with some depth. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the fun part about drafting a guy like Dallas Turner at the moment for the Vikings is that you don't really have to rush him on the field. You can come up with a creative package to get him out there, and if there's one thing that I believe Brian Flores can do, and that's come up with a creative package for a player to maximize his strengths. So we can get Dallas Turner out there as necessary and kind of like ease him in. Uh, you'll see some good plays from him this year, I bet.
And with the struggles this year at cornerback as far as depth and injuries and whatnot already, having that pass rush to make things easier on the corners is going to be essential.
Yeah. You know who you're not going to be seeing a lot of this year, Adam? At least not so far.
Oh, no.
Lewis Cine.
Yeah, I don't know what the plan is there. It seems like I've been reading that Minnesota wants to trade him, but
Who's
how?
trading? Yeah, I don't really know who's.
Are you going to get like a
giving
swap
up.
of sevenths, or what are we looking at here? Because he hasn't
You
done
don't know.
anything to give him value, I don't believe.
They said that he suffered some kind of lower leg injury and he's been sitting out. He has not been practicing with the team. That's not good for a player who really needs to fight for every rep and every chance to get on the field, even if it's with the third and fourth stringers. Like, he absolutely needed to be out there and he needed to be making plays, and for him to just continue to get hurt. And I know it's not your fault when you get hurt, so I'll never hold that against a player. But like, when you're not on the field contributing, I don't know what his future is with the team. And I don't know how longer you can justify keeping a roster spot for a guy based on the fact of where he was drafted.
Well, the regime that drafted Cine, I know I keep saying this on this show, and
But it's
I don't know
valid.
why, but the regime that drafted him and had plans for him left fairly quickly after his
Yeah.
arrival. So, I mean, there might have been some real good plans for him and ideas on how to use him, but the current defensive staff and coaching staff I guess they just don't share that outlook on him.
And you'll also never know. We never really got to see a healthy Lewis Cine out on the field. I mean, and like you said, the times that we did
The
get a couple
college
quick,
tape is good.
the college tape is really good. And then he had that leg injury, and like I know that we kind of get used to in Minnesota, like Adrian Peterson is the perfect example of a player who suffers a terrible injury and he comes back and he's better than he was before and he's the
Right.
MVP the following year. And you just expect that when you realize that the norm, honestly, is probably more of what happens with a player like a Teddy Bridgewater and potentially even a Lewis Cine, where you suffer that injury and you're never quite able to get back to where you were before. And I wonder if that's part of his issues, is that injury that he suffered so early and just him not being able to get to where he was, on college. Because you're right. I watched a lot of his college tape after he got drafted, and I was excited to see Lewis Cine in Minnesota. I thought that he was going to be a good contributor on defense.
Oh yeah, he was aggressive and smart and everything. And from what I saw on tape, I was excited about seeing him in the defense, but it just wasn't really a thing.
I thought you could stick him on the field and he could roam around in the middle of the defense, almost kind of like a linebacker, and blitz and get good pressure on the quarterback and drop back into coverage. And it's
I bet that was kind of the plan, is for him to be like in that Josh Metellus role right now. And
yeah. It's just it never worked out for him.
Speaking of Josh Metellus, did you see what he had to say about Justin Jefferson?
No, what was that? Screw this
he said
guy.
That whenever he goes in practice against Justin Jefferson, Jefferson is always trying to embarrass the defenders, and honestly, I think that's good.
Yeah.
If you're going into practice and you're going through and you're half speed on everything, you're not helping yourself or your defense.
Mm-hmm.
So go out there, give it, and make everybody better.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about with competition, and that's the whole point of training camp and preseason, is to have that competition and to go out there and to experiment and try new plays, new schemes, players in different positions, whatever. And it's a benefit. You don't want your defense killing your offense out there, but as a fan, and I would assume if I was a coach, hey, here's this young corner. We put him in one-on-one coverage with Justin Jefferson, and he was able to hold his own. He was able to go step for step with him, or maybe he was even able to jump up and bat down a pass. Like, that is how you would know, hey, maybe this is a guy that I want to keep on my roster, or I want to give him more of a look in preseason when they're able to make those kind of plays on the field.
Oh man, I hate this heat. I can't even think properly.
Yeah. I've been inside most of the day. It's my day off work, and it's just too hot. I don't like the summer. I'll just hang out indoors.
I don't blame you one bit. I'm just gonna sit here and pet this cat. That's my plan. Yeah, otherwise there isn't too much going on in the world of Minnesota Vikings right now. I believe it's a week from Saturday that Minnesota kicks off their preseason.
Who do you think will be QB number 1 in the first preseason game? Sam Darnold? Does Sam Darnold go out with the ones and get some work? Or do you do he's a veteran, we don't have to put him on the field? Do you go that route?
I think we're going to get Nick Mullins. A lot of Nick.
Yeah. I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see Sam Darnold at all in preseason for Minnesota.
I don't think we're going to see Aaron Jones either.
Nope,
we're not going to see many starters.
No Justin Jefferson. You're not going to see any of the veterans, really.
Jake likes Darnold to start week 1 of the preseason.
Hey, I'm excited, and I think all Vikings fans should be excited too. I'm excited to see what J.J. McCarthy is going to be able to do out there, and he'll probably be against third, fourth string guys. So I'm hoping he looks pretty good when he's on the field.
I always wonder about when you're trying to get a guy adjusted to your attack and your plan, your strategy, and you got preseason coming out, and you come out and you aren't going to run your actual offense in the preseason. You're going to run this generic plain Jane offense. Is that really helping? Is that helping to do anything other than develop some chemistry between the players?
I feel like it helps the player adjust to the speed of the game. You hear so much about how it's so different going from college to the NFL on just the speed. So it's a lot of the mechanics, being able to go out, run the huddle, get the play call off. It's loud. You're in a different environment than what you've been practicing in. It's some building chemistry. And so I think
but not as much with the play itself, huh?
Yeah, it's not so much about the play itself as it is. I was able to go out. I was able to get you guys in formation, read the defense. You make a play. I think that's what it comes down to a lot of.
Yeah, so I have not been watching a lot of anything that is in the NFL news on television these days. I haven't been keeping up on Hard Knocks. I haven't been watching Receiver. I haven't been watching any like the NFL Network stuff leading up to the preseason. Any of the training camp live stuff I haven't been watching. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of out of the loop here a little bit.
I will say Receiver is a lot of fun. Although with Jefferson getting hurt, if you're going in as a Vikings fan expecting there to be a lot of Justin Jefferson coverage, it kind of drops off in the middle during the portion of the show, when he was hurt and in rehab. So they don't really feature him too much during that point. So
I have heard that the Devonta Adams stuff is real good.
Yeah, that's real good. George Kittle is real good.
That is one entertaining gentleman right there.
St. Brown, the receiver from the Detroit Lions. If you were not a fan of his prior,
he is such an interesting man.
You will become a fan of his from watching the Receiver show. Hard Knocks is I love that show. I've always loved it. It's so much fun to watch the Giants be a terrible organization because this episodes that are airing right now were filmed right before the draft, Adam. So you're listening to the GM have all the discussions behind the scenes of them essentially wanting to replace Daniel Jones, but not being able to do it. And you're thinking, I hope Daniel Jones isn't watching this.
I saw a couple clips of the Giants when they were talking about not wanting to lose Saquon Barkley and calling him up and being like, hey, if you get an offer, let us know. We'll match it.
Yeah.
And then him taking that other offer anyway.
Yeah, they do. That happens. They try to pull this junk where they say, we're going to let you go test free agency, but you said you wanted to be a Giant for life. And so if you really want one, you should take less money to pay for us. And we'll put you in the Ring of Honor and blah, 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 and you'll live on. Or you can make like an extra $1 million to go play for another team.
I bet the one thing they didn't want, though, was him going to a division rival.
Yeah, they say that. They say that they didn't want that to happen. And
that is the scary stuff about free agency. And we've been seeing more, speaking of free agency, about a little bit of Kirk Cousins' regret about Atlanta.
Yeah, it sounds like Minnesota was upfront with him about their plans at the quarterback position, and that was why he chose to leave. I'm also sure the money helped. That's probably a determining factor in that as well, too. But he was, I'm assuming, very blindsided when Atlanta drafted a quarterback. They did not sound like they told him that was their plan.
Yeah, from what I understand, they told Kirk Cousins that if they resign him, he is going to be the starter. That's going to be the plan, but that they were interested in exploring some options with young quarterbacks. And from the sounds of it, it does not sound like Atlanta said that to him at all. And that situation in Atlanta is really even more interesting, too, because now they signed like a number quarterback 1.7 or 1.8 or so in Taylor Heineke, who I don't want to call him a high-end backup because he has starting experience.
Right.
But now he's kind of pushed to quarterback 3 there. If 3 is where we're at. And my cat just opened Outlook.
Uh-oh.
What the heck?
Don't let him send an email.
So Taylor Heineke is he said that he's excited to get to work and earn his spot and do whatever it takes. But we've seen from Taylor Heineke in the past that he works hard and he wants to be rewarded for working hard. And I am not sure that he's going to be in a very happy situation there with the Falcons either.
It's a weird dynamic because if Kirk would have stayed in Minnesota, let's pretend the Vikings situation is exactly the same, only instead of Sam Darnold, we have Kirk Cousins and we still draft J.J. McCarthy. There's not as much pressure on Kirk if he's in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy as his backup. Like, there would always be that little bit of fan outcry the first time he has a bad game, whatever, throws an interception. You're always going to get the social media, the Twitter people are going to say, oh, J.J. McCarthy should be starting. But you were never really going to do that. The Vikings would never really do that. In
I got a what
Atlanta,
if for you.
what's that?
If Minnesota did keep Kirk Cousins and still want to draft J.J. McCarthy, do they still make that trade with the Jets to move up one spot to get him?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure. Because I think they'll look and they'd say, we have Kirk Cousins right now. I don't think we need a young quarterback that desperately that we need to give up more capital. I'm not sure if they do that.
I don't know. I still think they would because I still think that they're really wanting to build for they would have been wanting to build for their future regardless, and that Kirk would have been looked at as a, I don't want to say stopgap, but like, you really were only going to be here for a couple more seasons before we move on to our rookie. So I still think they would have been aggressive in finding
I don't want to say Kirk because that's the tail end of his career, but he is getting older.
He's getting closer. He's getting closer to it for sure. What's interesting though is that he went to this situation in Atlanta now where he hasn't started, he hasn't won anything. The fans are not invested in him like what the Minnesota fan base was invested in him.
And this is a downgrade in offensive weapons too, especially wide receiver.
Yes. The pressure for them to switch to Michael Penix is going to be a hell of a lot stronger than what it ever would have been if he would have just stuck in Minnesota and had J.J. McCarthy as his backup.
And Minnesota never did that to him when he was here. They had Trevor Siemian and guys like that in to back him up.
Right. Because if Kirk comes out and if he has a slow start because, hey, new offense, new players, I'm still recovering a little bit from an injury. It didn't quite go maybe the way I wanted for the first 4 games. The media pressure and the fan pressure for them to switch to Michael Penix is going to be insane.
Oh, yeah.
That is going to be very loud, and it's going to be very tough for Atlanta to ignore that conversations. Like, I know they paid Kirk to be their starter, but but
what's funny is we're going to have a similar situation like that with what's going on with Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy, except when people start complaining, the Vikings aren't going to be very receptive to the league concerns because they know Darnold is there for.
Yeah. That was a question I was going to ask you, Adam. Good segue. I think, for better or worse, the Vikings need to just stick with Sam Darnold for the duration of the season, barring injury. But like, I don't want to see them. Oh well, it didn't go.
I don't know. If Minnesota opens 0-5, I'm going to be complaining pretty hard.
Yeah, I'm going to complain too. But like, if your plan was to sit him, then your plan is to sit him. And I don't think that we need to. Oh, we're going to switch to Nick Mullins for a game, and then we're going to switch to whoever else for a game, and then we're going to be back to Sam Darnold. And I don't want to see that musical chairs get played.
That was fun last year. I didn't appreciate that at all. I get why they did it. They were trying to find a hot hand and someone to roll with, but they know who their guy is for the future right now. So there's no point in kind of like plugging around at this point. Just play Darnold. I don't want to say this is a disposable year, but it's definitely a transition year.
If there was ever a year that you're not super concerned about the record, it's probably this year. It is this year.
If Minnesota wins 6 games this year, cool. If Minnesota wins 10 games this year, cool.
Yeah. Unlike you, I don't want to sit through a 4-win season.
No.
That sounds miserable. I never want to sit through those. But if it happens, I would understand it.
It's been a while since we've had a really terrible season. We had what in recent history. I think the worst one is was there a 3-win season in there somewhere?
Yeah, that was the year before we drafted Matt Khalil.
Yeah, I guess that's how you end up with the number 4 overall pick, or I guess it was number 3, right?
It was number 4, and then they traded. Or was it 3, and then they traded back to 4?
Yeah, I think they traded so that the Browns could go get Trent Richardson, right?
Oh yeah, Spielman did some shenanigans. That's right, with Cleveland and was able to trade. Say what you will about Rick, he was pretty good at stuff like that.
He was able to flip some players and picks for some pretty good stuff. Like, I couldn't believe what he got for like Percy Harvin and some of these other players when they were on their way out of Minnesota anyway. Some of the deals he got were real good.
Did we trade Sidney Rice, or was he a free agent? How come I don't remember that?
I'm not sure.
Did Sidney Rice leave in free agency? Does anyone in the chat remember that?
I think he went to Seattle in free agency, right?
I don't remember.
Because I just assume all Vikings players go to Seattle when they're done.
Yeah, they all end up there at some point.
That's my plan anyway. But yeah, I'm excited to watch some preseason football tomorrow. I am not going to be glued to my television because, like I said, this matchup is not one I'm really looking forward to. But I'll have it on the background while I play on my phone. Why not?
Which of the 800 streaming services do I have to be subscribed to in order to watch?
I believe this one's going to be on ABC.
No, so this one's just on television. I like that.
I think that's my guess anyway. I think that's what I remember seeing.
I'm old.
Look it up.
I am old. I like when games are on TV. And I just turn to Channel 5 and watch the game.
Trying to type, my cat's tail is just swatting my hand there the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, tomorrow's the Hall of Fame game. Watch on ABC and ESPN. Yep. Okay.
Do you play much Madden, Adam?
I gave up on Madden probably 5 years ago and haven't looked back.
Yeah, it hasn't been good for quite a while. Then I'm bringing it up though because
people are really loving that NCAA game.
Ooh, NCAA is great, but EA has been releasing some player ratings lately, and those are always fun to look at. It's fun to look at who they think are the best players in the league, and so they put out every team's starting running back with, what their rating is to it. Who do you think was the lowest rated starting running back in the league? And there's a reason why this is Vikings related.
Let's see. Dalvin Cook?
Alexander Madison for the Raiders is the lowest rated starting running back in Madden with a 77 overall.
Well, when you don't get a rushing touchdown, that's going to happen.
I typed in there, to be honest, 77 might be a little high for him, considering the season that he came off from.
I like that Minnesota was willing to give him a shot and see what he had, but they needed some more depth and competition there. And that whole Cam Akers situation is odd, too. I still don't know what to think of that.
Yeah, I still don't really understand that either.
Because they were either interested in him and going to sign him with the physical past, or they weren't really as interested as they said they were, one of the two.
I'm still even confused if he came in and got a physical.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that happened at all.
I don't even know if that was real or fake news.
You got that Charlie Waters guy reporting all that stuff, and now he is saying that this is going to be Harrison Smith's last season, and I am not taking that. It's a solid journalistic thing either, because I'm not ready to throw that one away either. I know Harrison Smith is towards the end of his career, and this could very well be his last season in the NFL. It will probably be his last season with the Vikings, which is fine. He's made a big impact while he's been here. He's had a great career. And if he decides to retire after this year, that's more than fine. But you got to take a look at who's doing some of this reporting and start to wonder, do these people really know anything?
Or are we just making stories up for clicks and traction on the internet? I wonder that oftentimes too. At Harrison Smith, I'll believe Harrison Smith is retired when he is retired. And even then, like I was joking in the chat, if the Vikings are having a pretty good season and they're making a playoff push, can you call Harrison Smith on the phone and pull him out of retirement? That's probably a fairly easy conversation if he's still in shape and if you need him on the field for the Vikings. So even when he's retired, I'm not even fully convinced that he's retired.
Just to make sure, you do you think that Harrison Smith is a Ring of Honor guy in Minnesota?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Because I can see some arguments for or against. He's been very good, but he's never been, the best safety in the league, really. He hasn't brought the team a championship or anything like that. So, I mean, I know it's a team game, and a lot of those kind of things can be measured as a team, but I don't see a way that he doesn't get in the Ring of Honor here in Minnesota.
He gets in the Vikings Ring of Honor. We've discussed this before. I think that's maybe as far as he goes. I don't know if Harrison Smith is a Hall of Fame player, although, I mean, I'd have to do a deeper dive into his stats and see where he ranks among active safeties and stuff like that as well, too.
Right.
So I don't know if he makes the Hall of Fame, but he's for sure in the Vikings Ring of Honor.
It makes me wonder if, like, when he is eligible for nomination in the Hall of Fame, if he will at least get a nomination. I mean, he might not be a finalist, but it'd be nice for him to get some recognition anyway.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. But yeah, like I said, I don't have a ton to talk about this week. Kind of quiet on the Vikings front. I was not able to attend any training camp. I haven't bought any Vikings tickets or anything like that. And I guess I just read yesterday that J.J. McCarthy moved his locker, and now he has a locker right next to Justin Jefferson. And apparently, J.J. McCarthy has been bugging Justin Jefferson about what he can do to become a great NFL quarterback, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Like I said, you got to learn from your peers, and that's why we're a team. That's why you want your players to work together and learn from one another and have that open line of communication between one another.
I like the fact that we haven't seen a whole lot of turnover on the coaching staff. I know that we've seen a lot of offensive and defensive players. We've got a lot of new faces, got a new kicker. This team is going to feel different this year when you watch them. It's not going to be – you kind of knew what to expect, even though you didn't know if you were going to get bad Kirk or good Kirk. You knew you were getting Kirk. And I don't know what we're going to get this year, so I'm excited to see what the feel is going to be when Minnesota actually takes the field in New Jersey for the season opener.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. We've had that stability with Kirk at the quarterback position for, 8 years in Minnesota, I think was how long he was there. And so you're going back to having more of that unknown with him not being your starting quarterback anymore. And we have high hopes for Sam Darnold, but you don't know what you're going to get until you get him on the field running the playbook, against an actual NFL defense. Like, we won't know until the season starts.
All right, so here's my I know we have plenty of more weeks to talk about this, but do you have one player in mind who you want to think would be a surprising cut before the 53?
Surprise cut.
And also, if you want to talk about, what are some of your biggest surprise cuts that you've had to see as a Vikings fan in history?
I think a surprise cut for this year, I'm going to go with Kenye out there at the running back position.
Oh, okay.
Because, we always pencil him in as this core special teams player / this guy that you can come up with a creative package to get him out on the field.
But Minnesota's never really used him offensively.
Yeah, we've never really seen that package of plays. And so we're going to continue to hope this year with the changes they've made with the kickoffs that maybe that gives him more of an opportunity to be that special teams guy. But I could see another player maybe being able to step in and fill in that role and also be able to contribute in other ways on the team where it's you can kind of just move on from him.
I kind of feel bad for N'Keal Harry. Unless his injury to Robert Tonyan is something serious,
Yeah.
his switching to tight end meant his odds of making the roster real tough. He is a tall target, big body. He could be a real red zone target as a tight end, but making this team is going to be an uphill battle for him.
Yeah.
And I remember like a couple of years ago, one of the most shocking cuts that I ever saw was I was not expecting Minnesota cut Brian Robinson as the last cut of the season.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. I was a big fan of his, so it hurt a little bit more even too because the guy had such a great personality and he worked his way up into a nice role with the team, and man, that one hurt.
It's not a surprise, but I mean, I really don't think Lewis Cine is going to make this roster. And
I recently did my 53-man prediction for the Viking age, and I don't have Lewis Cine on there. But I do have Booth on there.
I don't think Andrew Booth makes it either.
It's going to be interesting for some of these guys that are young that might be running out of opportunities.
Yeah, you can talk yourself a little bit easier into Andrew Booth just based on the position that he plays and the fact that you always keep an extra corner or two around on the roster. So maybe he's got a little bit more leeway with him. He might end up being the last corner kept on the team and buried on the depth chart, but he can still be out there for the team. The leash, I think, is too short for Lewis Cine. I just don't see him making the team.
The special teams thing you shared in our chat about how they're going to make changes to onside kicks and everything, and I understand the frustration with that, but with the new kickoff rule, surprise onside kicks don't make sense.
So once you take a step back and look at the new rule that they're implementing, had they not done this, you could have just surprise onside kicked all of the fucking time.
Oh, yeah.
And your chances of recovering would have been probably pretty good. So I understand why they're like, hey, we gotta limit this a little bit so that we keep this under control.
There are some weird rules that like you can't onside kick unless you're behind, which I don't know why you'd onside kick if you had the lead. I've seen it a few times. What was that one year that the Saints did it, right?
Yeah, it's the Saints or the Seahawks potentially.
Yeah, like you can't want at halftime an onside kick. It was like, what?
Yeah, it was a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that play was mind blowing. But that's why I love football, because like really weird stuff can happen at any time. You can plan all you want, draw up whatever you want, but you never know what's going to happen until it happens on the football field.
So we've joked about this before, but I really do think at some point the NFL needs to just sit down and reevaluate their entire playbook and be like, their rule book, and go through
let's talk about offensive and defensive breakout players. Do you have any player on offense you think is going to kind of surprise people and have a really good season? I think that although he is going to be second on the depth chart, I do think this year that Ty Chandler comes out and he'll have like maybe 600 rushing yards and maybe like 5-6 touchdowns, and he'll establish himself as being a nice complementary running back, I think.
Yeah, that's a good take. I like that, Adam. I don't know if I really have one at the moment.
I'd like to see Powell step up too and be. I know last year he kind of was a wide receiver 3 at the end of the year, but I'd like to see him establish him a little bit more, especially if Jordan Addison misses some time at the beginning of the season. Kind of like to see him step up and do his thing, because he looked good at times last year.
I know Dallas Turner is the player, the draft pick that I'm most excited to see take the field for the Vikings, because he's the one that's going to have the most immediate, impact out there.
Josh Metellus is the most fun.
Yeah,
you can watch him and you're like, I don't know what's he doing this play. Just keeping an eye on him, seeing what he's doing. But
yeah,
honestly, I think a player that isn't getting talked about enough that might have a huge impact, and I think could be in for a big season, is Blake Cashman.
There you go.
I think he's going to have a solid year for tackles. I think he's going to work real well with Ivan Pace. as that duo in the middle, they're going to allow a little bit more of a stout spot there, right past that first line defense. If I'm still not sold on the trenches on the defensive side, I don't think they did enough in free agency and the draft to kind of fill that up. I like Levi Rodriguez Stain. That's his name, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like him, but and Jerry Tillery is just kind of like a mass signing to me. It's fine. And Jonah Williams, I like him, but I still don't know if they've done enough to really build that trench up to where I think that they've got enough in that middle there to kind of slow down a lot of these attacks, especially with how many great rushing attacks they're going to be facing on the schedule this year. Yeah, that defense is going to have a hard time slowing down a lot of running backs, especially right up the gut, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be a spot that they're going to have to, they're going to have to be creative, Brian Flores, with his scheme on how they're able to,
I think we're going to see a lot more of like the safety sneaking up, whether it's going to be like Bynum or Metellus or sneaking a nickel up, because having that extra person up there is going to be big. But that's also putting a lot of pressure on your cornerbacks, which I know that there's Shaquem Griffin and Byron Murphy there, and no, not that Byron Murphy, not the one, not that one, the other one.
We're not going to talk about that story.
No.
Here's the thing, though, and this seems to be the philosophy that Brian Flores goes with a little bit too, is that if you can send pressure, if you can get there fast enough, and disrupt your quarterback, disrupt the play, even if you don't get a sack, it doesn't matter if your corners are not holding up on the edge.
Right.
If you're bringing that pressure fast enough and getting to the opposing quarterback quick enough and disrupting the play, that's all you need to do. So I believe that he will be able to out scheme the lack of talent that they have in a couple places. He can out scheme and figure out packages and how to really maximize the players that they do have to kind of make up for those deficiencies on the field.
Why aren't people talking about a Caleb Evans when they're talking about corners?
I don't know. The Vikings don't really have a lot of corners that are interesting for.
I mean, Evans is young. He's got starting experience now. He played, I thought, fairly well when he was in there. And he is not, I haven't really heard his name much at all.
It's not an exciting group. I don't think there's much, there's not much hype with them, I guess you would say. Because outside of.
But why isn't there hype?
There's no real
young player with some, who's been looking good and getting an opportunity now to maybe have a bigger role or have a significant role. Why not get a little excited about that? Instead of being skeptical and, worrying about depth. I know that Minnesota has 2 veteran starters at cornerback and then a lot of youth and, inexperience behind that. But, I mean, overall, I'm not super concerned as long as those 2 veterans are there to start and you got some talent behind. And Caleb Evans is one of those guys that if he is cornerbacks free this year and he's got to go in and make some plays, I'm not going to be too upset.
So long as we got Brian Flores out there calling plays for this defense, like I'm pretty happy with the product.
I was so glad they were able to retain him this offseason. I am still shocked that he has not gotten more interviews for other coaching opportunities around this league.
Yeah, I want to say I'm thankful that he's still in Minnesota, but like he probably should be a head coach of another team right now. But let's benefit from this while he's here for as long as he's here in Minnesota.
But while we're talking Flores up, we got to kind of mention his defense did kind of fall off towards the end of the season. I don't know if that was personnel or what the deal was there as far as injuries or what the deal was, but I'm hoping you can find a little bit more effectiveness and consistency this year.
And teams do start to catch up. By the end of a year, you've got on tape pretty well what you're going to do on defense for all the other teams to scout out and kind of look and hey, if they show this front, it might be this look is what they're going to run, whatever. So it's going to be important for them to add new wrinkles to this defense so that they can continue to be exciting and add to it, continue to get that pressure out there.
Yes, it's finally getting to the point where I'm starting to get a little, I know you probably noticed, I'm getting a little excited for football now.
Yeah, because there's actual football stuff happening. Like we're not talking hypotheticals anymore. Like you hit that, at least I hit that point in the off season where you spend so much time talking about, well, this guy's potential and this potential, and if we do this in the draft, and you're talking about 3-4 years from now, the team could look like this, and you get a little weary of that. So it's exciting when you can focus on the immediate future of the franchise.
Is it weird to think that if there were still 4 preseason games that we'd have Vikings football this weekend?
Yeah, that is weird to think about.
I am so old school that I still have it in my mind like, oh, it's the 3rd preseason game, it's dress rehearsal. And that's not a thing anymore.
There are certain things that I will just never be able to just unlearn. That's one of them. Because when we were talking about Sam Darnold earlier playing in preseason, I almost said, well, that 3rd preseason game is your dress rehearsal game, so you can see him before a drive. That's not true anymore. You're right. I forgot about that. That's not true anymore, Adam.
Yeah, this league it's made, the changes are just happening so rapidly, too, that I know that a lot of the real changes are making the game feel a little, I won't say unlike football at times, but I'm still really concerned about how the officiating is going to handle that, hip drop tackle rule.
Yeah, and didn't they do something with the chain gang? Like,
okay, that one I'm not sure on.
I thought they did something where they're the way we used to measure first downs, with the chain gang. I thought they're using some kind of new system with lasers or something like that.
But I remember feeling the same way about the hip drop tackles I did about when they added that rule about running backs leading with the crown of their helmet. Do you remember when they added that?
Yeah, I remember that.
We were like, oh no, a running back can't lower their head and plow through people anymore. This is going to change the game forever. It's going to be terrible. And you know what? It wasn't that bad.
It was fine. It was fine. And we have seen the NFL, when they implement kind of a terrible rule that gets called too much, they've backtracked on it a little bit. So if this hip drop thing ends up being called too much, like, they'll fix it.
Is there any rule in the NFL that you wish you could just change right off the bat? Here's the one that I wish I could change.
The fumble into the end zone.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's a good one. Another good one is that I would love to see, and I've seen this happen many times before they changed the rule. You should be able to jump the offensive line if you don't touch them.
Like on a field goal, or
to block kicks.
Yeah, to block kicks. Yeah, if you can hurdle over someone without touching them, yeah, you kind of should be able to just do that.
I mean, not like throw your teammate over them or anything. I mean, I know that how ridiculous that sounds, but it happened in the NFL like twice in one game where a guy jumped the center and got the block, and boy, that was exciting football.
Yeah. The fumble into the end zone thing that happened, that is you cannot, that's one of those rules where if you tried to explain it to someone who's not a football fan, they would not be able to grasp it, like why that's a thing at all. And anytime that happens, you need to get that rule out of the game. I think that's the big one that I would get rid of.
Well, they make so many changes in the NFL to the kind of like help an offense to make games higher scoring and all this, and then they leave that rule in place. An offensive player trying to score and then change it into a touchback? What?
Yeah, I don't. That's a bad call. I'm trying to think what else really sticks out. I talk about this.
I think of too many.
I talk about this quite a bit. I do think roster sizes need to increase.
You've talked about that. You talked about how stupid you think inactives are.
Yeah, I think inactives are dumb. Like, just let the whole team be active on game day. What does that hurt? Like, what does that hurt at this point? Absolutely nothing. And with them adding,
I
they're
actually love
adding.
that you've gone back and researched why they're wearing actives, and you told us about it a couple times, and it's like, I get why they did in the past, but now it's not necessary.
Yeah, it's a rule that I understand when it was 1973. It's a rule that we don't need in 2024. And I
No.
do think with them continuing to add extra games onto the end of the season, extra regular season games, uh, they're going to have larger rosters here really soon because you're asking these players to play 18, 19, 20 regular season games, Adam. You're going to have injuries, and you're going to have injuries to star players, and you're going to need people who can step up and fill that void, towards the end of the year. And do you really want street free agent at tight end who hasn't been on your roster, who hasn't played anything, coming in on the extra games, Roger Goodell, that you added? Or do you want a player who's been with us through training camp, who has the chemistry, who can step in and actually contribute to the team? Like, I know what I would rather see as a fan.
One of the best things that came out of this whole I'm going to say this sound terrible, but one of the best things that came out of COVID was NFL teams being able to put veterans on their practice squad.
Yeah, that's a really good rule. That's a really good rule change.
And I'm disappointed it took that to have that to happen, but
yeah,
so far it's been fantastic, I think, for the league in general. It's kept the quality of players on NFL rosters high while making sure that each team can have access to these players and that they aren't just sitting in free agency and, keeping more players on the payroll.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. But that's all I've got for this week. I don't have anything really else to talk about unless you got something you want to discuss.
Do you think the NFL will ever just go full college football, 1 foot in bounds? Or do you think the NFL is always going to be, nope, it's a higher level, the game's got to be harder, we're going to keep 2 feet in bounds for a catch?
I hope they keep 2. But I understand if they make the change because, like I said, the rule changes in the NFL are usually offensive based.
I know.
Trying to get those scores up and keep things more exciting. So I could see it happening. Plus, with how, that question I asked you earlier, I bet you if you would have asked, Cowboys fans or Lions fans or whatever, they'd have been like, Packers fans, they'd said the same thing. Define what a catch is clearly.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, sometimes I don't know.
It's one of the most basic fundamental parts of the game, catching a football. And there are situations, like you said, where you cannot explain why it's a catch or not a catch. And
right.
I know that's by design because I know the NFL likes that little bit of a gray area where it's like you have to make a football maneuver. Well, what's a football maneuver? That's open to interpretation as to whether or not it was a catch. And that's kind of partially what makes the game interesting, is there's that human interpretation of the rule. As much as we hate it, don't we also all kind of like the fact that we get to have that discussion occasionally of like, oh my God, we all get on social media at the same time. Was that a catch? Was that a catch? I don't know. We'll find out after the TV timeout. And then they come back and they're like, yeah, here it is in super slow motion. It is or it isn't. And that's what keeps us engaged in the game. So I get it.
And Lions fans would also probably want to talk about linemen declaring eligible.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that conversation, living in Michigan, that conversation still happens all the time.
Could you imagine if they went full arena football and just let a receiver be in like full sprint before the snap? Like if you're going to let Justin Jefferson have a 10-yard head start before the play even starts, like he could just burn. He would burn defenses even worse than what he actually does now. That would be insane. That would be insane at a pro level.
But we'll be back next week, probably Mr. West and I, to talk more Vikings football. In the meantime, until Mr. Smith comes back, we'll be holding down ship here. I don't know when he's going to come back, but we'll take care of things till he does. I want to thank Mr. West for swinging by. I want to thank everyone who joined us in chat. Everybody who follows us wherever they listen to the podcast. Thank you very much. We were number 1 on Podomatic again last week, so thank you very much. Come back and we'll talk more Vikings football next week. Stay classy, Minnesota.